Citadel. That's Amazon Prime's latest attempt to create a successful franchise by throwing bucket loads of money at something that just isn't very good. The Rings of Power come to mind. You know, even though the show has only released 2 episodes so far, I think anybody who's watched them will agree that this thing is a total dud. But let's talk about why it's a dud. Here's the thing, is it the worst show that's ever been made? No, but it's close. But no, Disney Plus still takes the prize for worst content ever created with shows like Kenobi or She-Hulk Attorney at Law. Just the title of that show is an embarrassment. No, it's not the worst show. You can watch it, and yes, you'll be wasting, an hour of your life when you do, but it isn't the worst thing you'll ever see. It's a very paint-by-numbers spy thriller that doesn't really know if it wants to be serious or if it wants to be kind of cartoonish and comedic, which means that any attempt at humor falls flat every single time. It is a manufactured show, right? Like if there was an assembly line where you could just manufacture little prefabricated, shows, this would be it. Like that's the best way I can explain it. Now, oddly enough, there's an article in Variety that explains why Citadel, or at least partially why Citadel was such a bad show. And it says that, I think the title of it was that Citadel is a business plan in search of a show. And the article goes on to explain that the show didn't originate as someone's creative idea. Like there was some writer who was like, hey, I have a great idea for a spy thriller. No, instead what happened is that the head of Amazon Studios, Jennifer Salk, had a business plan for, well, look, we need a show that has international appeal, that can generate international spin-offs, so that we're looking at a global marketplace, not just the United States, but like we're looking at something to be sold in Asia and Latin America and everywhere, and we want to create all these spin-offs and stuff like that. So she had a business plan, and then she approaches a production company and says, what can you give me that will allow me to do this thing that I want to do? And this show is the result. And that's not how you create creative content. You don't have studio executives saying like, you know what I'd really like to do to make more money? I'd like to have a show that I can create all kinds of spin-offs from it, and I can create an MCU type of universe for it, and it's going to allow for merchandising and product placement and all this stuff, and give me something that will allow me to do that. That is so backwards. That is not how you're supposed to make creative content. Hollywood today is not being run by people who are actual creatives that know how to make stories, right? Or that have interesting stories to tell, and then people who are, sort of talent agents go out and find that talent, bring that to the executives and say, trust me, this person knows what they're doing, they've got a real unique vision, and let's give them a shot and put their vision on the screen, and it's going to be a big hit and make us tons of money, right? Like that used to be the way it was done, but now it seems to be that corporate executives and possibly lawyers and people in that world are now saying, here's what we want, now let's find some kind of corporate yes man hack who will create it for us. That's essentially what you're doing. And that's one of the reasons why you're seeing such terrible content coming out of all the major streaming services, out of all the studios, the stuff in the theaters, the stuff that's online, all of it, at least 90% of it, sucks. It's focus group created. And it reminds me somewhat of the movie Big, right? Remember with Tom Hanks? There's a scene in that movie where Tom Hanks, because he's a grown-up, but he actually has the mind of a kid, like a 12-year-old, he's in this meeting with all these other kind of stodgy adults wearing suits, and they're trying to figure out what toys little kids would like to play with. Now, the adults, they've got pie charts and graphs, and they're trying to figure out, using focus group studies, what kids want to play with. But because they're not actually kids themselves, it's like a mystery to them to try to figure out what it is. But Tom Hanks, because he's still a kid in his head, he can come in and just be like, I want a robot that turns into a bug or something like that, which just sort of mystifies the other adults in the room. But it's just something that he knows as a kid is going to be enjoyable to play with. And it ends up being a big success in the meeting. And so I think that's sort of like what you see with Hollywood today, is that you have these non-creative types. The person that thrives in a corporate environment is probably one of the last people you would ever want to be a creative storyteller, right? Like the attributes that you need to have to thrive in the corporate world and to climb up that ladder are not the same attributes, at least in most cases, that are going to lend to being a good storyteller or a good writer or a good producer or a good director or whatever, good filmmaker. those usually quite antithetical to each other. And there should always be that creative tension between the people who want to make money on the one hand and the creatives who just want to tell a good story on the other. Like the creatives, their passion is the story, 100%. It's like Francis Ford Coppola with The Godfather, right? Like he wasn't so much interested in making money. Like, no, he was obsessed with telling the best possible story. And he wanted to do all these things, but there was like financial constraints on like what he could do. And there was this push and pull between like the studio executive types who wanted to make money, and then there's like the pull on his end, which just like he just wants to make the best possible movie. And in the end, you get absolute magic on the screen, which is The Godfather, right? But nowadays, there's no more Francis Ford Coppolas anymore. Like now it's just the studio executives saying, here's what we want, let's go find us some hack who will make it for us. And that's one of the reasons why you're seeing such terrible content. Now to talk about Citadel, this is a show that cost $300 million. Honestly, I've had this theory for a while now. I'm just gonna throw it out there that I swear to God, some of these movies and TV shows, this has got to be part of like an elaborate money laundering scheme. I'm almost semi-serious about that because you just wonder, where did that money go? You know, and then there's other things in this, just blatant cash grab kind of stuff. I mean, where it's, you know, this egregious product placement. I noticed one there was for Grubhub. And apparently, I'm pretty sure that they CGI'd in the product placement, which means that they had a blank bag that had a Grubhub logo on the bag, right? But the bag in real life, the bag like on the set was just blank, or like basically a green screen on the bag. And so then they're going to put a different company's logo depending on where it's being streamed. So if it's being streamed in India, well, then there will be like an Indian company, you know, like on the bag. And then if it's in America or maybe certain parts of America, it'll be Grubhub. Maybe somewhere else, it's Uber Eats. And they're just pasting on this like logo of a company onto a green screen bag. And audiences notice this. It takes you right out of the story and right into the fact that, holy crap, I'm just watching a commercial. I'm watching a commercial masquerading as a story, and I'm paying money to do it, right? Because Amazon Prime isn't free. You have to pay for Amazon Prime. And so you're paying money to watch a glorified commercial with this paint-by-numbers show that's meant to have international appeal so it can create spinoffs and all this stuff. It's just this cash grab for Amazon Prime. You know, and it's the brainchild of a corporate executive who doesn't know her ass from her elbow when it comes to storytelling, and all she cares about is making money, which is fine if you're a corporate executive. Like, that's their job. Okay, great. Their job is to make money. They got to maximize profit. Great. But you're not a storyteller. But she has now gone into the storytelling business by, you know, creating this show, and that's, of course, and you're seeing the predictable result. The show's terrible. And it actually really is sad, because I think a lot of people are under the impression that, you know what, hey, it's 2023, all the stories have already been told. You know, in every genre, everything you can think of, it's all been told. But that is total bullshit. There are so many interesting stories out there that could be told. I mean, it's beyond belief. So like, just off the top of my head, I was watching a YouTube video the other day, and it was telling this story about how in 1976, Neil Armstrong, of all people, led an expedition of dozens of scientists into the remote jungles of Ecuador to go into an underground cave system, massive underground cave system, where supposedly there's this legendary golden library filled with thousands of metallic books made of gold, that are supposedly, once again, inscribed with an alien text. I mean, possibly an alien text, or just strange symbols, or a language that nobody's ever seen before, indecipherable. And some people speculate that this lost library, hidden under, you know, the jungles of Ecuador, contains, hidden knowledge or lost knowledge from an alien civilization on how to build technologies that are sort of unfathomable to us. And in this cave, Neil Armstrong and these other scientists, they came upon an ancient burial site where they found this skeleton sitting upright in, like, you know, a chair / throne, whatever, that was dated to 1500 BC, so 3,500 years old. This skeleton's like, how the heck did it even get in there, you know, that long ago? And also in this cave system, and they have documented pictures and stuff of this, is that, you know, the walls are flat, they're straight, they're carved at right angles, they have straight edges along like the ceilings and stuff like that, which led some people to postulate that this cave was man-made. And it's huge, by the way. I mean, these huge cavernous spaces were like cathedral-sized spaces that you're sort of walking through. And you're like, well, my God, I mean, this would be thousands of years old. Who in the heck built this, and how did they build it deep underground, etc. Anyway, the point is that Neil Armstrong then went back home, but he never discussed what he found there. And it's this big mystery, and it's this really interesting story. Now tell me, that could not be the beginning, the genesis of some kind of Indiana Jones type story. But once again, don't make it Indiana Jones. You know, don't do that. Don't just take an old IP and throw it. No, make something new. Just create a new character. Make it an original screenplay. You know, just like with Nathan Drake with, the Uncharted series. Just make a Nathan Drake type character. Do something like that. But take that genesis of an idea and turn it, you mix it with some speculation and some fiction. Maybe you actually have them find that. People wonder also why did Neil Armstrong go down to that cave? What compelled him to do that several years after the moon landing? And then there's this whole other story about, did he encounter something, aliens for example, on the moon? Now that might sound silly, but just imagine how interesting that story could be. How interesting an Indiana Jones type story you could make out of just that one thing. And there are dozens, hundreds of examples like that you could use to create an interesting story. How about Mars? Everybody likes to talk about Mars right now. Now everybody has heard about the face on Mars, in the Cydonia region, and there's also some pyramidal structures that are nearby. That's interesting in alone, but there are other structures on Mars. There's apparently one that's a pillar, or an obelisk, if you want to call it that, that's square-sided and is 10 miles high. Think about that. So it's in the shape of like a skyscraper, and it's 10 miles freaking high. It's not a mountain, it's not a cliff, anything like that. No, it's a freaking obelisk that's 10 miles high. If that were on Earth, that would be so high that it would be well above the clouds. Airplanes would not be flying at the top of it as they were flying like 36,000 feet. They'd still be like flying around the middle of this freaking tower. Think of that. So if you want to make a movie about, some astronauts going to Mars and encounter, to figure out what is this giant obelisk, and then so you take something that's real, and then you mix it with some speculation and some fiction, maybe some fantasy, whatever you want to call it. Was it an ancient civilization on Mars? Because once again, you can also point out to people, and this is real, that Mars once upon a time did have an atmosphere, and it had oceans. And at some point, a billion years ago or whenever it was, it lost those things, and scientists still don't know why. Was it an asteroid impact? Some people postulate it was actually a nuclear explosion, like from a nuclear bomb. And I know that sounds crazy, but there are actually books on this. And just think about how interesting a science fiction movie you could make with that type of an idea. So there are tons of stories out there that you could use. And they're just floating around the internet right now. They're in people's minds, and you could do it. You could make movies like that would just intrigue the living crap out of everybody that saw it. You would have tons of people going to the theaters or signing up for your streaming service to see it. It would be intriguing, it could be fun, it could be mysterious, all these things. You could do it. It's out there. But what you need to do is flip the way that Hollywood is currently making its movies. Right now, Hollywood is run by lawyers, and it's run by corporate executives. These are not creatives. These are not people who know what they're doing. Instead, they, in many cases, have an agenda, an ideological agenda, which of course we see. They hire, corporate yes-men hacks who tend to have a certain ideological bent to them, an activist bent to them. And they're putting out content that nobody really likes. And you see it over and over again where like the one time that Hollywood just gives, people what they want, like Top Gun Maverick, it becomes a massive success, makes billions of dollars. And they could repeat that again and again and again, but they're not, because the wrong people are making the decisions. There's a terrific quote from Sean Connery that I don't remember exactly, but essentially Sean Connery was saying, he's like, I'm fed up with the idiots. This growing disconnect, this growing gap between the people who greenlight movies, i.e. the executives at the studios, and the people who actually know how to make movies. So this idea isn't something new. A great, actor like Sean Connery, he saw this from an inside perspective, and I think all of us now on the outside can see it now too. The wrong people are making the decisions on what to make. They don't know what to make. They're baffled. They're looking at charts and graphs on and focus group studies and percentages, and they're trying to figure out, what the people want to see, and it's just a mystery to them. They can't figure it out. You gotta let creatives make these stories. And it's not gonna be a hit every single time, of course not, but you're gonna have far more hits and far fewer duds like Citadel if you let the right people, the actual creative storytellers, the people with original ideas, interesting ideas, make those movies and not have the corporate executives who are focused on entirely different things, and in many ways, the wrong things to make a good story. So that is my ramble on Citadel. It is a very mediocre show that costs an extraordinary amount of money, and it's not really worth your time. It just isn't. And it serves as a good example of exactly what not to do when making a good show. So, catch you in the next video. Now, by the way, this is just my very first sample video. It is not really meant for YouTube yet, but we might post it anyway. I have not finished building my little studio out right now. There's still some things I need to do. I need to put movie posters in those frames behind me. Right now, they're just the generic pictures. But nevertheless, wanted to give this a shot. I saw Citadel, felt like I had some things to say about it, so here we are. But hopefully in the next video, I will have completed my studio by then, and it won't look so ridiculous with whatever the heck is going on in those little images and the poster frames behind me. So, with that being said, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. Obviously, this is a brand new channel, and catch you in the next video.